Welcome back. In the last video, we looked at how to create the custom user model, and this was what we did. Next, we're going to go ahead and remember we created an object here. It's pretty much a manager for the user model. What the manager does is it separates the concern of the SQL. It could be no SQL in this case, but anyways, it separates the concern of the database model, the database table, from its transaction, right? So it's done this way so that what you have in your database table is not changed because it's the manager, the custom user manager in this case, that handles the querying of that particular table. So that even when you query, you don't make changes to this table and your data still remains intact. If we're to use this custom user model which comes with Django, then we will be all right. We would not have to do any of this. Right? So if you're okay with having just a username and password in your application, then that's great. But for us, it's something we're not going to, of course, we decided we're not going that route anyways. And that's why we have to go through all of these workarounds. So before we create this custom user manager, I want to take you into the code. So this is the user manager, which the user model in Django uses, right? So this is the user manager we called as custom user manager. So what we're trying to do is, you can see that this user manager inherited from the base user manager class, right? Which is pretty much the same thing we did. We inherited from base user manager class. So what we're trying to do is write at least two of these functions in our code. That's what we're trying to achieve right now. This function, which is the with perms, we would not need to rewrite this at all, right? But we would need to reproduce this in our own manager class. Just the way the default user manager class has those two functions, is the same way we need to have those two functions. So that's pretty much what we're doing in this video. Well, by the time we start querying this user model, then you understand why this manager class is useful. The first function we're going to create is the create user. Okay, so for a user, what are the things we require? We require an email field, a first name, last name, and a password. So those are going to be the parameters to this function. So let's say email, first name, last name, password. Okay, so we've created our function. Always a good idea to create dot strings. Always a good idea. But let's just give some space because that's what the problem is right there. Maybe there's too much space. So first thing is, we want to make sure that these values they're going to be values in there. So we'll say if not email. So what is this checking is, okay, if email was not supplied, what do we want to do? We want to raise an error. Value error. What do we want the message to be? Users must have an email address. Okay. So if not first name, raise value error. Users must have the first name. Okay, do the same thing. If not podcast name. How is this looking? Oh, sorry. Supposed to be a small letter L as is specified over here. Raise value error. Users must have a last name. So if all these clauses pass and there's no value error raised, then we can continue what we're trying to do. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to now specify what the user is going to be. So user equals self.model So first specify the email equals to self.normalize email equals to email. What's that error? Okay, it doesn't want space in between them. Okay. So what this normalize email does is, let's say you have an email, let's say surprise at fun.com. He wants to change it to surprise at fun.com. So that's pretty much what it's doing. It's normalizing the domain part. So while you're filling in the field, if you specify a name at FUN in capital letter, it's not going to matter because what's going to be saved in the database is going to be the normalized part. So that's pretty much what this function does. And you can go check it out on GitHub and see what's in there. Okay. Next we want to specify the first name and last name. First name equals to first name last name equals last name. Okay. So next thing, you want to set the password. So I'm going to say user, which is this object right here, dot set password raw password equals to password. Next we want to save after we've set the password. So the reason why we don't just put password equals password in the user model is because what this set password does is it hashes the password. So for example, if your password is surprise, it changes it to a cryptographic thing that just in case. So what this is done is, of course, it might not really look like this. So this is what the set password does. It takes your English or your text password and changes it into it scrambles it into a hash. The reason for this is if someone gets into the database by whatever means, right, and they're not going to see clear text password. They're going to see a hashed password like this. So this is done out of the box using Django, which is really cool. So that's what the set password does. Let's just clean that. So just did this for explanation purposes. Okay, so okay, good. So now we save using self.db. Sorry, let's call it db. Okay. What's that error? Too many blank lines. Okay. Let's clean it up. Good, 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 good. So we've created the super user function. The create user function. Now we want to make the same function for super user. So we could just copy this. Oops, sorry, this is class function. So it should be indented properly. Okay, cool. So we're just going to change this to super user. Super user. Cool. Let's say create a super user, the doc string. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to just reuse this create user, but we're just going to change some of the attributes in there. And I'll show you what it is. Okay, so first thing we say user equals to self dot create user. Right. So this self is referring to the class user manager. Some dots create user. This is the create user because we've already formed it. So we're going to leverage the function that we've written. The other alternative is to now write all these if statements again, and yeah, it's not good. It's always good to try not to repeat yourself, because functions that you write become functions that you have to test in the future. And every code you write needs to be tested. So the more you write, the more work you give yourself in the future. So it's a good idea not to repeat yourself. It's a good idea. Pretty much we're just supplying this as attributes. Yeah, okay. Before we save, we want to then change. So if we go here, you remember for the basic user, we said they're not super user and they're not admin, but they're active. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change. Oops, that's not a problem. So what's going to be done is going to be user dot this admin, change it to true. User dot is super user, change it to true. Then we save the user model. User dot save using underscore db, and now we return self dot db. I hope I did the correct thing. Awesome. Return user. And that's it. That is it, my friends. That's how you create a user manager. Okay, let's clean up the code. So this is it. I could get the link to the actual Django documentation on creating a custom user. I could just paste it in the description below, so in your own free time you can actually go over it. And since we never got to use this one, so we could just clean it out. Create a user model. Okay. Looks good. Looks good. Don't think there's any problem here. So let's commit. You don't have to commit. I have to commit. So look for something meaningful. Okay. So created a custom user manager. That's what we did. So commit, push. Okay. I want to see that it goes. Okay. Good. No problem there. Whew, look like a lot. I promise you, from here on, it's going to be easier. But having to create a custom user is extremely important. For a new project, you really want to do it, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to come to settings. And remember, I said that Django has its own built-in user model. In this case, what you now want to do is you want to let Django know that we are not going to be using the default user model. So to do that, we're going to come here. There's a setting for it. It's called auth user model. And we need to specify where the auth user model is. Okay, so it doesn't use the default because that's going to be some problems if you try to use the default. Accounts dot. So it's found in the accounts app, and it's called, so it knows to go under the accounts app, under models, and just goes to custom user. Yeah. So at this point, we've finished creating the user manager, the custom user. Next thing we need to do here is we need to carry out migration. Don't know if I want to do it right now, or if I just do it in the next video. Let's do it now. Okay, so we're going to do Python manage.py. So a migration is what it is essentially is telling Django that look, I've created some new models, created some new models, and we need to specify the new model in the database. Okay, you notice there's no SQLite database here. That's because we have not carried out any migration. One thing is you don't want to carry out a migration on your database without specifying the user model. So if you're going to use the default Django model, that's fine. You can go ahead and use it and carry out a migration. But if you're going to make a custom user, that's going to be the first thing you want to do before carrying out any migration. So let's say make migrations. I hope I haven't made a mistake somewhere. Accounts. So the way it works is if you make a change in any of your models, in any of the apps, you want to come and say Python manage.py, make migrations, and then the name of the app. Oops, what was that mistake? Field name for the construction was not included in the practice. Wow, that's a big mistake. Okay, let's go fix that. Yeah, this did not need to be specified actually. My bad. So the reason why So for required fields, first name, last name, we didn't specify the password because the password is going to be required by default. And also, the username field is going to be required by default as well. So that's why we didn't need to put it there. Okay. Another thing that was said here is custom user email, custom user.email must be unique because it is named as the username field. Okay, and that's true. We want the emails to be unique. You say unique equals true. Okay, I think we've made the right correction. So we've made the email field unique because, and it makes sense. You don't want more than one. You don't want two people to use the same email login. That's just going to be weird. So we want to make sure that our email fields are unique. And what else? Okay, I believe those were the two errors. Let's try it again. Make migration accounts. Woo! It worked. Okay, so manage.py migrate. Okay, so what that does is you can see all these database models. This is the only one we know we made, right? The accounts. It says that the migration is okay. But Django has other databases. You can see all these other tables. You see? And that's why it's important for you to sort out your accounts first before you do your first migration. Okay, so at this point, I think this is a good point to end this video. It's probably the longest video we've had. There's a lot going on here. Yeah, so let's commit this to version control. Remember, we made some corrections. So let's say made corrections to custom user model and have read out first migration. It makes sense for you to specify commits that make sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. So that when you're going through your code, you know what you did and changes. It's just very important, especially if you are working with someone else. And now we can push. Yeah, you don't have to push. I will push. Okay. Yes. We're going to end the video right here. We've done a lot. Good thing is by the next video we'll be able to actually start seeing some results. I know you're eager to see some results. Okay, thank you.